Zach Wilson was supposed to be the Jets franchise quarterback. When the New York Jets picked him, they saw a guy who could lead their team out of the endless abyss of being a Jets fan. It didn't work, like at all. This is his story. In America, there is no greater job than being an NFL quarterback. If you're good at it, you are a god in our society. It's the most important position in the most popular league. You would think that if we idolize quarterbacks so much in a country of 300 million plus people, there'd be hundreds of solid options at the NFL level to play quarterback. But while hundreds line up every year, only about 20 or so are considered good quarterbacks by most fans, and only a few of those 20, roughly 5 to 10, are considered elite. If your team picks the elite quarterbacks right in the NFL draft, your whole city can change. People feel prouder to be from there. The economy grows. Even Taylor Swift will start dating one of your players. If you pick wrong, the franchise sputters. While growth is still possible in some areas, the investment a team puts in a young QB is so much that it can ultimately weigh down the whole team if it doesn't work out. No team is more familiar with that feeling than the New York Jets. The Jets are one of the most cursed franchises in the National Football League. Their only Super Bowl came in 1969 in Super Bowl III, when Broadway Joe Namath guaranteed a victory against the mighty Baltimore Colts, and the Jets went out and won 16-7. That day was glorious, but in 2021 it was over 50 years old. And since then, the Jets had never developed a quarterback like Namath ever again. In the 21st century alone, the Jets drafted Chad Pennington, who showed flashes but ultimately got hurt too much. Then they drafted Mark Sanchez, who had early success winning 4 playoff games behind a great defense and run game, but struggled once the Jets made him pass more. And then when he struggled when he passed more, they signed Tim Tebow to be a huge distraction and deflate his confidence. Then they drafted Geno Smith, who got punched by his own teammate in the middle of training camp and lost his starting job. Then Ryan Fitzpatrick started for a year and was great, so the Jets paid him a ton of money, and as soon as they did that, he started sucking again. Then they drafted Bryce Petty, who sucked, and Christian Hackenberg, who never took a snap. Then they drafted Sam Darnold, who was the 3rd overall pick and thought to be a very safe bet, who ended up being terrible because he got mono in the one season he was actually doing well. The Jets hired a terrible head coach in Adam Gase, who would treat him like a baby, and he said that he saw ghosts during the game, and that's why he threw multiple interceptions. Into this franchise came Zach Wilson. A young kid from Utah, Zach grew up in a wealthy family and went to Brigham Young University, where he thrived in the 2020 COVID season. His legs were quick and his arm was incredibly strong. And with the second pick,
the New York Jets select Zach Wilson, quarterback, BYU.
Zach was a rough prospect. His impromptu style didn't directly translate to the NFL, but the theory went that with time, this kid could really be something. After he learns the playbook, he could put his above-average arm strength and mobility and wreck teams' game plans. The best idea would probably to start a veteran quarterback first and have Zach learn behind him. So naturally, the Jets did not do that and threw him out there in the first game of his career at Carolina. When Zach Wilson threw his first touchdown pass, the Jets' left tackle Mekhi Becton went down with a season-ending injury. He would not be back for 2 full seasons. Zach was now running for his life. In his first 3 games, he was sacked 15 times, only threw 2 touchdowns, and threw 7 interceptions. Zach's 2021 was underwhelming. He got hurt mid-season, and the Jets' best offensive performance came from his backup, Mike White, who Jets fans loved and cheered his name incessantly. The cheers for Zach never came. The highlight of his year was either this run against the Jaguars or Antonio Brown running out of MetLife Stadium in a game he started versus Tom Brady. Entering 2022, the 4-13 Jets had a lot of work to do. In the 2022 draft, the Jets got right to work, picking Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, and Breece Hall, all within the first 36 picks. 2022 is a fresh start for the team to show it was legit, and Zach would need a full training camp to get up to speed. But in the first drive of the first preseason game, he tore his knee and was out for the first 3 weeks of the year. When he came back in week 4, something weird started happening with the team. The Jets were winning, beating good teams, Pittsburgh, then Miami, then Green Bay, then Denver. But in all 4 of those games, Zach was really bad. The Jets were led by their young, hungry defense who would force turnovers and stop offenses, and the emergence of young running back Breece Hall. But in the Denver game, Hall tore his ACL. The Jets would now have to compete without their best offensive weapon. The next game against the Patriots, Zach was horrible, throwing 3 bad interceptions. Then the Jets shockingly beat the Bills and went into their bye 6-3. Prime position for their first playoff spot in 12 years. After the bye, the Jets went to New England for a 1 p.m. matchup in a cold windstorm. Zach was atrocious. It was the worst game of his career. He missed easy throws. He only threw for 77 yards, but the defense was electric. It was a 3-3 game with 10 seconds to go, and then disaster struck. A punt return touchdown by the Patriots to narrowly win 10-3.
He's gone, and that is a touchdown!
After the game, Jets reporter Connor Hughes asked Zach,
as an offense, though, I mean, when you guys are only able to score 3 points, the defense only lets up 3 points. I mean, do you feel like you let the defense down at all?
No.
Thank you.
in these 5 seconds, Zach lost any faith he had left in the locker room. With 2 poor seasons under his belt and a locker room upset at him, Jets head coach Robert Saleh made the call to officially bench Zach Wilson for Mike White. One had to wonder if this was it for Zach in a Jets uniform. Let's back up. What went wrong here? How does a second overall pick quarterback fail 20 games in to the point where they're benched? Developing a quarterback is complicated, and the exact reason why Zach failed is hard to pin down. There are 4 main factors that are a bit true, which when put together tell the whole story. They are coaching, ability, personality, and conspiracy. All 4 factors help us understand why Zach Wilson was such a quarterback failure. First, coaching. At first, offensive coordinator Matt LaFleur played Zach like Zach played in college, having him roll out of the pocket and throw deep bombs. But that resulted in a lot of interceptions, so almost immediately they pared that back and made Zach a game manager pocket passer. But he wasn't good at that either and still threw picks. Zach couldn't use his improvisational style, which is what made him such a high draft pick in the first place. All of this would have been fine if not for Zach's bad ability, reason number 2. All the coaching quirks could have been overcome if he just had ability. Zach did have above average arm strength and mobility, but his ability to adapt to pressure, to read defenses, and to complete basic passes was clearly lacking from the start. Another issue Zach faced was reason number 3, personality. A quarterback can't just be good at throwing the rock. They have to be leaders in a locker room. When a team drafts a 21-year-old quarterback, like it or not, they are now the face of the entire franchise. Young quarterbacks need to represent that well and gain the trust of their teammates. The best way to gain the trust of your teammates is to be good at football. Fellow players will like you if you are good at football. And if you're not good at football, another good way of gaining their trust is to admit that you weren't good at football. Zach demonstrated in that clip after the Patriots game that he wasn't capable of that. This is not to say that Zach's a bad person. By all accounts, he's a very nice guy. According to Robert Saleh, he's someone your daughter would want to marry. Look, this one time he gave a lady free Jets tickets, and he's also kind of funny. He just wasn't a great leader. Last reason why Zach Wilson got benched so quickly into his tenure is because picking him so high in the draft was all a conspiracy. You just gotta follow the numbers, follow the paper trail. It's all there. Zach's uncle owns JetBlue and was a good friend of Jets owner Woody Johnson, who belongs to the Johnson & Johnson family, which owns Splenda. Zach might have used Splenda regularly in his coffee. Oh, wait. I had it the first time. We don't need that connection. The way Zach moved up draft boards so intensely is curious, considering the small school and he only had 1 good season. But hey, what do I know? Maybe if the Jets had coached him better, he'd be better. Maybe he just sucks and nothing could have been done. Maybe if he was a better leader, the Jets wouldn't have felt justified to bench him halfway through his second year. And maybe Woody drafting him was all part of some backdoor deal to have baby powder on all JetBlue flights. But bottom line is, for now in 2022, the Jets rolled with Mike White, who went 1-1 in his first 2 starts and then shattered 6 ribs on a hit from Matt Milano. For 3 games, the Jets had said Zach was inactive. He needs a full reset. But then they said, screw that reset. He did it already. He looks great. He's back. Against the Detroit Lions, he was okay. And then he went out on a Thursday night game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets desperately need a win to keep their playoff hopes alive. In the northern New Jersey rain, Zach was putting on a masterclass, missing wide open receivers, getting sacked, throwing picks. The crowd was restless, and by halftime, Robert Saleh wanted to move on to his wild card. 5 years earlier, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of the Canadian Football League had won a championship off the back of their quarterback, Chris Streveler. Streveler couldn't throw, but he could run around pretty well and make something happen. So, the Jets turned to a Canadian Football League quarterback on national television instead of their number 2 overall pick. And even though Streveler couldn't throw the ball at all, he moved the ball better than Zach Wilson. Like, way better. The crowd went crazy when he, got one first down. The Jets lost, and it was a new low for Zach Wilson. He was benched for the rest of the 2022 season, which ended for the Jets in the same way the previous 11 seasons had, without a playoff appearance. Entering 2023, the Jets were a team in desperate need of a real quarterback. They were young and talented, but had fallen apart down the stretch. They needed leadership from a guy who was proven, a guy who had been an MVP, a guy who had done State Farm commercials and only rarely talks to his family. They needed Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers needed them. A few months of rumors led to a few months of trade negotiations between the Jets and the Packers. The deal was finalized in April, and Rodgers was officially a New York Jet. The hype for 2023 for the Jets kept reaching new heights. The Jets signed free agents, Hard Knocks came in, and Rodgers went to New York sporting events where he got a bunch of standing ovations. There was so much hype for the team that people forgot about the fact that Zach was sneakily still on it as the backup quarterback. The Jets could have easily signed a different backup quarterback in free agency, but chose not to. But for Jets fans, it didn't really matter. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? Rodgers tears his Achilles 4 snaps into the season and Zach has to play most of the games? Oh shoot, that happened! Somehow, after months of hype and 2 full years of failure, the Jets were back to the same place they were just a year ago, with a talented team around a young, struggling quarterback. Miraculously, on the night of September 11th itself, the Jets won on a walk-off punt return by Xavier Gibson. But the season was still in peril. Rodgers was out for the year. The Jets now had a few choices. A, they could sign or trade for an actual competent quarterback, or B, they could say stuff like, Zach's really improved, he looks a lot better. Lies, lies, lies. The Jets went with option B. Zach continued to start, and he continued to be bad. Jets fans were done with him. Even Joe Namath.
I wouldn't keep him. I've seen enough of Zach Wilson. All right? I've seen enough.
Then, in a game versus the Chiefs with Taylor Swift in the house, Zach was actually pretty good. But anytime Zach ever looked like he was turning a corner, he failed quickly after. A few weeks after the luster of the Chiefs game had gone away, Zach's and the Jets season had sputtered again. And versus the Bills, head coach Robert Saleh literally tackled Zach to the ground to prevent him from falling. And then, shortly after in this game, he benched Zach for a 3rd time for quarterback Tim Boyle. Also in this game, Zach tripped on nothing and fell into the turf. Truly, this is it for Zach's Jet career, right? He was benched 3 separate times. This has to be it. Nope. Tim Boyle was so bad that the Jets wanted to go back to Zach after he started a mere 2 games, but according to reports, Zach was hesitant to go back to the starting role. Zach himself and Aaron Rodgers disputed that report, so believe what you want. But Zach ended up starting again versus the Houston Texans, where he put on the best game of his career, throwing for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. The next week versus Miami, Zach got pummeled into the ground in the first half, didn't look himself, and was ruled out with a concussion. This finally was the end of Zach Wilson's New York Jets career. I sometimes find myself looking up at the stars and wondering if it will ever happen. Will we ever develop a franchise quarterback, win a Super Bowl, make a Super Bowl? Why can other teams with dismal histories pass us by and enjoy winning when we remain in the cellar of the National Football League? Why haven't we made the playoffs in 13 years? Other times I find myself thinking about Zach's talent. In rare moments, I saw everything the Jets saw in the NFL draft. He did things regular quarterbacks just can't do. But those moments would quickly be forgotten with a sack, an interception, and a 3-and-out. But I know there's a good quarterback in there somewhere. Just didn't work. After the 2023 season, it's obvious Zach's Jets career will be over. Maybe he'll find success on another NFL team. Maybe he'll move back to Utah and take a cushy job with JetBlue. Maybe one day I'll be walking around in Utah and I'll spot Zach going to a Jazz game with his kids. He'll look happy and I'll get to shake his hand and say thank you for the good times. Those 2 drives versus the Chiefs, that 1 throw versus the Titans, and when you hit the Gwitty. Until that day, so long, Zach. Goodbye from my sports life. Farewell, my Mormon prince.